Okay.
Okay.
Paulina's here and Tabile.
Yeah. Tandile boy.
Welcome, everyone. We're going to start in the next 5 minutes or so.
Welcome everybody to the IIBA Technical Thursdays. Thank you all for attending. I'm going to give this over to our Head of Operations to make all the necessary introductions. Please note on the right-hand side of your chat, you may post any questions you have. They will be conducted in a Q&A session at the end, and please enjoy. Over to you.
Cool. Thank you so much, Sawan. So Tools and Techniques Thursday is a concept of the Joburg IIBA region. We try to host this every week at the same time with different practitioners and sometimes even experts, but we try and make it as practitioner focused and led as much as possible. Today, the 1st of October, we have Joe Newbert. Joe is the Chief Training Officer at Business Change Academy. It's a training academy that tries to equip as many business analysts as possible to be the best versions of themselves. Today he's going to be talking about the best business analysis technique that you think you use but you don't. So obviously as analysts, our job involves a lot of trying to get things done, and techniques are one of the things that we really need a lot of so that we can do our work well. So some quick rules and other bits. Stay on mute unless we've cleared you to talk. If you want to talk, we can only do so at the end. Switch off your video as well. It's only Joe and his presentation that we're going to be seeing on the screen. If this was a Zoom room presentation, we're going to auto-allocate you to presentation rooms, but it's just going to be a straight Joe presentation, so we will all be together. The presentation lasts about 25 minutes top, and then we try and take like 5 minutes to get to your Q&As if you want to. What happened? You may paste your questions in the main chat. We'll read them to Joe at the end. Presentations will be uploaded to our YouTube page, and we've made reference to it there. Unfortunately, we do not, it's not practice that we send out the presentation deck, but if Joe wants that we should send it to you, we will definitely do so. We are members of the IABA South Africa. We encourage all people to be members because there are a lot of benefits that flows from that. To become one yourself, there is our URL. You can go to the IABA SA, wildapricot.org, join us. Or just search the IABA South Africa and it will take you to the website. For the next event, as I said, this happens weekly. You can visit the South African events page at IABASA.wildapricot.org /events. The last thing is, if you would also like to present a tool or technique to the community, we have digitized the process. So go to our calendly.com, JHP sessions, tools tech Thursday, and try and book a slot there. So it will show you only slots on Thursday, and the slot will either say 5 or 5:30. So try and go there, and if you want something to, have something to present, go there and try and book a slot. We do not discriminate as to who comes to present to us because we think this is by practitioners for practitioners. And thank you for joining us. Enjoy the presentation. Joe, back to you.
Nice one. Thank you, Chepo. Thank you, Selwyn and Catello. Right, let me just get my screen sharing here for you. Okay, well, thank you all for joining me today for this bit of a mystery presentation, the best business analysis technique you think you use, but you don't. I'm just going to get right started into this. We have about 20 to 25 minutes. I've just got about 9 slides here, I think, in total. So we'll just walk through these and sort of lead up to looking at what this technique is. So it's an ongoing question. What is business analysis? And it seems that everybody has a different opinion of what business analysis is. Is it a role? Is it a tool set? And even within that, within organizations, within teams, there are different job descriptions, different roles, all built slightly differently. So there's so much variety going on from country to country and organization to organization. But I find that this model is a good picture to really try and convey the extent of business analysis and what it can do, the value that it can bring. So here you'll see that we've got a couple of axes here. We have influence at the top and we have scope at the bottom. And across that span, across that axis, there are sort of 3 broad areas that as business analysts we get involved in. And some of us may do all of these things. Some of us may have a piece of the puzzle along the journey in a project. But really what we're looking at is we're starting with business improvement. We're then moving into process improvement. And then after we've looked at process improvement, we move into IT improvement. That's the theory, at least. I think often a lot of projects try to jump into that 3rd thing straight away without doing the first 2. And often when they find out that they've sort of skipped steps 1 and 2, they have to go backwards and try and do some remedial work before moving ahead again. So business improvement is really about defining the tactics to align performance of the organization with the strategy that it's setting out to achieve. And then once that sort of strategy has been set and the tactics defined, there might be individual projects that go away and try and put these things in place, try and implement various solutions along the way. And one of the things we should do really is to start with process. So process drives IT, because IT is just one component of a process. If you think about something like the POP-IT model, people, organization, process, and IT. That people, that organization, that process is key. So really what I like to call pure business analysis is that bit that happens in the middle, and that's about improving the processes to enhance the operations, to move the needle, as it were, so that business as usual can function really well. And then once you've got this business process crafted, you can see which of these particular tasks or activities in the process might be good candidates for some kind of IT system, automation, outsourcing, or whatever the chosen solution is. And the reason for sharing the two axes here, the influence and the scope, these are important things. And I think these are the things that often perhaps frustrate us because we don't realize how these impact us. But really, the closer you are to the business, the closer you are to that initial strategy setting, the more influence you have. And the deeper you go in the project, once the strategy is defined, once the process has been created and you're just looking at the IT, the influence you have on that end solution is less. So that's some of the frustration, right? We sort of sit down in IT, or some of us do, and we sort of looking up going, well, you know, it doesn't feel like this is sitting well inside of the process or inside of the business. As I say, we feel like our influence is less. And of course, our scope as well, the scope of work that we can do increases the closer we are to that business improvement side of the scale, and less so when we move into IT improvement. The scope is more fixed the deeper we go into projects. And this is important because this is what sort of shapes us, shapes what we do, shapes our frustrations and all of that stuff. And I want to talk a bit about frustrations. And one of my frustrations is with templates. And I see this a lot. I see a lot of template driven analysis, right? It's all around, and we sort of almost try and cling to a document as being some kind of lifebuoy to keep us safe, perhaps, to stop us from drowning in the projects that are going on around us. But there are a lot of problems with template-driven analysis. I mean, we're pedal stalling documentation here. We're putting documentation at the forefront of projects as if it's something we should aspire to. And often these documents are constraining, right? Because they're a template. It means that there's a standard version of them, and we have to abide by them. So they become a one-size-fits-all form that we sort of complete. And the way we complete it, we sort of go from top to bottom, right? We start at the top, and we've got up there, we've got the introduction and the background, and then we get into the scope, some of that project-y stuff around risks and issues. And then the deeper we go in the document, we start to hit some requirements, right? Some functional stuff, then maybe some non-functional. We might get into informational, and it's just limiting our approach, this one size fits all form. And it just encourages us to produce content fodder. It's like, there's a heading 1 or there's a heading 2. I better chuck something in here. So what can I chuck in there? Well, first of all, let me go to the documentation that already exists, right? Let me see if I can cut and paste some stuff out of there and chuck it in. And then once I've done that, let me see what gaps are left. And then we sort of go away and try and plug those gaps based on where the document is leading us to. But that stagnates us, right? I mean, there's no personal growth in that, and it builds organizational silos, because it's sort of, we get into this mode of taking a document, completing a document, and then we toss it over a wall to somebody else for them to deal with. So it's such a impersonal way, really, of trying to get requirements across. And of course, that's just building organizational silos, which mean that one team's going to point to another team, or things are going to fall between the cracks. And this really roots us in that old school definition of bridging the gap. And if you've attended anything I've spoken at before, you'll know how much I loathe this particular phrase, because this bridging the gap sort of keeps us in this almost 1990s thinking, where we run between stakeholders and just sort of scribe and act as a courier who's moving documentation back and forth. And it just dumbs business analysis right down. But we can be more than that. I mean, there's so much opportunity if we just want to stretch ourselves a little bit. And something I've found that works really well is technique-driven analysis, because techniques are so fun to play with. They're so fun to do. So they activate analysis because they get you thinking, and it brings some elasticity to what you do, because you're not governed by that one form. You can now stack techniques on top of each other and use them in different ways at different times to meet the needs of a particular situation. And that's going to bring about business relevance, because you're going to pick a technique that suits the situation that you're working in. And that's not just going to stimulate your thinking, it's going to stimulate the thinking of everybody, the stakeholders that you're working with. So it really gets us thinking in a systematic way, and it starts to bring some meaningful collaboration. There's the word engagement, and engagement's one thing, but I find that techniques bring a level of mobilization to projects. And that's really helpful, because that's going to open up really a world of possibility. So that's a bit of the sort of rationale, a bit of the backstory about why techniques are important, and perhaps to get you a bit excited as well about this technique I'm going to talk about in a minute. But before we get there, I'd like you to all open a new tab in your browser, grab your cell phone, whatever it is, and I'd like you to head across to menti.com and stick in that code that you see there on the screen, 2344498. And I'm just going to give you a couple of minutes here, but I'd like to know which of these 10 techniques you use. We've got PESTLE analysis, 5 forces analysis, MOST analysis, the internal resource audit, SWOT analysis, an organization diagram, value chain analysis, business process modeling, task analysis, and human activity analysis. And so when you get over to Menti, there's just going to be some checkboxes for you next to each of these techniques. And I'd just like you to tick the ones that you use. And I'm doing a bit of magic here, I hope. I'm not sure whether this magic trick's going to work out. It's a bit like a card trick, pick a card. But I've got a bit of a guess that you probably use 9 of these, but I reckon that there's one that you don't. And I want to get some evidence to see if this is right, to either fail or to pass this test.
Okay, Joe, they had asked for the link, so I've just posted it in the chat.
Yeah, cool.
And I'm gonna also post the code is 2344498.
There we go.
Cool.
444, yeah, 444, yeah, that's right. So that should get everybody in. Let's see if we got any voting underway. Gosh, lots of voting going on. Business process modeling is the early favorite of what people do. That one's jumping up. Over 30 people. Okay, that seems to have settled down jumping, just maybe 1 or 2 flickers. So I'm going to carry on. Anybody who's still voting, please do. I'm going to come back to these at the end. Okay, so far the trick seems to be working a little bit. Right. So at the moment, in 3rd place, we have organization diagram. And that's the one that I thought you'd think you do, but I'm sort of gonna maybe share with you now that you don't, because as I say, this is built on a bit of an assumption and a trick. So if you look at this slide and you look at the icon at the top left with the 3 people in a row, that's probably what you think an organization diagram is. That's probably why you ticked that box, but it's not. That's an organogram. we have to be pedantic with our techniques. We have to call them the right things. But I want to talk to you about the intersection between strategic analysis and business analysis. And I want to talk to you about the organization diagram. And I want to show you what it is and how to build one, because it's a wonderful technique. And it's something that really does help you transition from the first phase to the next phase. Or if you're catching somebody else's work, it's something that you can do to try and put some structure in place and understand what's being sort of given to you, passed to you, presented to you, and just sense check that within the context of your project. So the 10 techniques that I gave you, 5 were strategic analysis techniques and 5 were business analysis techniques. And the results in the chart also show that the ones on the left, apart from SWOT analysis, aren't particularly used, which is understandable because it's not, strategic analysis is not something that we all necessarily get the joy of being involved with, but business analysis is obviously something we're stuck right in the middle of, and that showed in the results too, with basically being off the charts on the right. So I want to talk to you about an organization diagram. So I'm not going to waste too much time. I'm just going to get into it here for you. Now, like any good BA technique, right, it starts with a blank piece of paper and we draw a box in the middle, a square box, because, you know, we're all about the boundaries, right? We're all about the scope. And one of the techniques that is that was on that list is PESTLE analysis. Now, PESTLE stands for political, economical, socio-cultural, technological, legal, and environmental. And what it is a technique to examine the external environment of the organization. So that's the sort of strategic technique that you want to use to get a better understanding of some of the pressures that the organization is facing. And you take that information and you put it in a box above the boundary box that's there in the middle. And really you start to illustrate some of the key stuff that really the organization is facing. And the example I'm going to do here is, because I sort of know trade companies, and I figure something you guys can relate to too. So, and if we look at the moment, right, there's a bit of an economic downturn. There are some health and safety regulations creeping in due to COVID, meaning that we've got reduced class sizes, and that's causing a need for virtual training, you know. There's difficulty in the job market right now. There's a lot happening there. A lot of people are impacted. And so there's a desire for industry qualifications and certifications. So we're taking that information that was done in the strategic analysis and we're starting to bring it in to the business analysis side. Now, that was PESTLE. One of the other techniques I put on that list was 5 forces. Now, Porter's 5 forces really looks at like the market, the pressure in the market, the competitiveness, and it appreciates new entrants, suppliers and customers, and substitute products and services that are coming into the market. So if I think about that from a training perspective, what I've got is I've got competing training providers, right? There are classroom courses, there are online courses, there are on-demand courses, in-house courses, even organizations' internal BA forums are a form of competition, as are IIBA chapter events like this, and even books and blogs be considered competitors because, you know, it's about education, so it's all in there. So now I've started to get some of this external environment around the organization, and I can start to look a bit deeper, and I'm going to start to think about process now. So on the left here, I've got suppliers and partners, right? So I can really start to think about who are the people that feed into the organization for this particular problem or project I am working. And so finance, obviously we need funding if we're going to exist. There's a lot of things that we need to set up. We might have accredited partners, so we partner with Assist Knowledge Development over in the UK for their BCS courses. There are logistical suppliers, so there's the place where that we do on-site trainings, we might use their venue. We need to get materials, run prints, manuals, there's a whole bunch of supply and logistics for us. And then, of course, we need some top trainers too, right? We need some people who are skilled and qualified to be able to conduct the training. So we can start to think about some of the external parties to us. So all of these are external, but they're all providing us with some kind of input into the organization. And then from there, we can just jump to the right and we can start to think about people who benefit from this. So our beneficiaries, our customers and owners, perhaps. So obviously there's some form of shareholding. There's owners that they're going to have a stake in this. There might be industry bodies like the BCS or the IIBA. And of course, being a training company, there are delegates and there are prospective potential delegates too. So now we're really getting a sense of the world that is around us, or around the organization. And from there, we can take another leap now. So what we do is we now bring in value chain analysis, which I think was another one of the techniques, which a few more of you have said that you do. And this is where we look at inbound operations, outbound marketing, sales and service. So we're starting to think at a high level business process perspective. And this is where I can now put a process in to my organization. So I'm really showing the boundary between what we do and the people inside and outside who help us do what we do. So here a high level process might be for us. Obviously we've got to create a course, we've got to get a course. We've got to arrange some classes, whether they're virtually or in the real world outside, and we're going to need to register some delegates to come on board. Once all of that is in place, i.e. we have a course, we have a class, and we have some people who want to attend, we're going to deliver that training. And once the training's done, people are going to sit their industry exams to get their qualifications. And once we get their marks back from the industry bodies, we're going to issue the results to them. And of course, that can only happen if we promote the training in advance. And as we go along, there's going to be a whole host of queries that we need to respond to. So here you can just see I've got the high level business activities that are happening here. And then the next step that you do next is to link the outside with the inside. So here I've got my data flows that are coming in, and I've got some arrows to indicate whether things are just coming in or perhaps whether communication is going both ways. And I've labeled some of the flows here to indicate the various elements that are moving around through the process. And then once we've done that, there's a very important step now, and this is something that we don't often think about, and I say that as a royal we inside of organizations, but we don't think about linking it to our competition, because our competition have the same finance sources, they have the same banks, they have the same accredited partners, they probably use the same suppliers, and they might be trying to tap up our trainers. And again, on the other side, when the competition goes out, they're going into the same pool of industry bodies and delegates and prospective delegates. So here you can really see a business ecosystem for the organization that is on one page and provides such useful, rich context for transitioning between that strategic analysis step and the business analysis step. And I'm going to round this off now by just saying, well, when does it make sense to use this diagram? I mean, it's actually so versatile that, as I said, it gives business context, right? It shows the external business environment and it shows the internal value chain. And it's wonderful for agreeing project scope because it sets the boundaries and it shows the key business activities that we can then model further, perhaps with CAPWO and business activity modeling. And it breaks down silos. So we're cutting through the organization. We're not trying to do this based on an organogram where different departments are sort of in conflict with each other or aren't well integrated. So it really does encourage an end-to-end process thinking approach that sort of breaks down silo mentality. And it's a wonderful technique to use in a workshop because you can easily throw one up on a whiteboard and use post-it notes to move stuff around or to put values in certain boxes. And it's a wonderful way to control process modeling. So process modeling is a top-down activity, right? Level 0, 1, 2, 3 as we decompose this thing. So here we really are starting at that top level, and from here we can drill down into any of those process tasks in order to do some more detailed modeling. you saw that there were a number of key stakeholders on their right. I mean, we had owners, we had delegates, we had the various industry bodies, there were the trainers, the suppliers. So already we're starting to see key stakeholders, internal stakeholders, because we had marketing, we had sales, we had operations, we had that value chain, and those external ones I just mentioned too. So there's all the beneficiaries there. And then finally, it's going to help us deciding the approach, because when we do business process improvement, we typically have 4 choices, and this isn't 4 choices for the system as a whole, but within the system, you know, we could outsource certain parts for other people to develop. So that might be the query resolution. We could redesign certain elements, or we could go out and buy a package to fulfill. So finance is always a good candidate for getting a package, or we might automate some of this stuff if we find that there's a lot of manual activities. And a bit of a rhetorical question here, but is this technique included in the IIBA BA-BOK? The answer is no, it's not in there, which is a bit of a shame, because I find this one of the most useful ones, the most helpful ones that I use. And in actual fact, of those 10 techniques that you voted on just now, only 2 of them are in the BA-BOK. So there's certainly another level that I think we can lift our skills to if we're to support business. And that is my time up, but I would like to end, because as I said, this was a bit of a magic trick. I made a leap of faith that this isn't a technique that you knew and that you thought it would probably be something else, but I'd love to get your feedback on that. So if you can hop onto menti.com again, I will post the link again, menti.com, and your code this time is 1913909. I've just got 2 questions for you. I'd like you to be honest with me and let me know if this is a new technique for you. So if it is, please tick the box, and if it's not, then don't tick the box. And secondly, I'd like to know if you found this useful and whether you think this can help you in the work that you do. So again, if you will use this, please tick the box, and if you won't, please leave it empty.
Thank you, Mr. Newbert. Excellent presentation. I'm just going to go through the questions we received in the chat quickly. Gavin has asked, you mentioned other techniques that help to populate the organizational diagram. How in detail do these need to be completed to complete the org diagram?
That's a really good question, and the short answer is they do need to be done first. One of the things which I didn't touch on here is brainstorming, and I deliberately didn't include brainstorming as one of the techniques because it's always picked as, it always comes out whenever there's a poll as being the most popular technique BAs use. But personally, I don't find brainstorming useful in its native way. So if we all sit in a room and we sit around a flip chart with 4 quadrants on a whiteboard to represent SWOT, the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, often we just sit around that and try and brainstorm something. What's really useful with brainstorming is to have a technique to help you do it. So PESTLE and 5 forces are good techniques to use properly in order to brainstorm and get some good answers to put in that top box. And I suppose it really, I mean, you get out what you put in. And if you are working with business strategy, you want to be quite thorough in your thinking about it. So I would suggest that you put some effort into those other activities first. But often if you're not a part of that, so often you're on the receiving end of strategy, right? And it's barely half a page, or it's a 20-minute meeting where somebody sort of just casually tells you it. This is a good place to start to say, hey, there are a lot of gaps on here and I'd love to ask you some questions. And that's a good way to get started. Let me know if that doesn't answer the question.
All right, so there are There's another question here from Lalita as well as Wanga. Will this presentation slides be shared?
Sure. What I'll do is let me just throw up the final slide. You can pop me an email. There's my details. Pop me an email, and I'm happy to send them to you.
Okay. Tasneem Hendricks asks, how many BA techniques exist?
I think the Babok's got about 66. I've got a list of about 124 on the website. And yeah, and we cover those in our training. There are probably a few more, but not masses. So I'd say about 125.
Okay. Raisibe asks, when would one use the organizational diagram versus the business model canvas?
They're different tools for different things. So the business model canvas is around looking at the business model as a whole and understanding, you know, what the ideas are and the service are, and perhaps is more geared up to a more sort of startup type environment. Excuse me, but the organization chart probably works better in more structured, more aged corporate organizations. But as much, I mean, when I said there are some pre-techniques, please do not think that is an exclusive list. I mean, there are many that you could use to do some pre-work to fill an organizational diagram. And I would imagine that the business model canvas could provide a lot of information to feed into this. But where this is helpful, and I guess the big takeaway for this is to really, this is the tool that I use to transition from that sort of blue sky thinking into, okay, let's start to actually make this happen now. So it really takes that sort of conceptual idea thinking and says, let's turn this into a process and see how it might work.
All right, there's two more to go. So one from Lizo. She says, is this for understanding the current state of affairs?
It could be for either. It could be for either. So it's certainly the current state of affairs in terms of the external environment, but in terms of the inputs and the outputs in the process, that could be an as is, or that could be a to be.
All right, the last one from Theodora says, definitely useful. At what level of the organization